The sun had barely climbed over the horizon when I stepped out of my apartment building, the city streets humming softly with the morning rush. Life had been steady for the past few years. Clara and I had a small but cozy apartment. I had a job that paid the bills, and weekends were filled with laughter and errands rather than chaos. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Yet, as I crossed the street toward the corner cafe, I couldn't shake a tiny itch of unease, a feeling I'd brushed off countless times before. My cousin Ryan had come into town unexpectedly, claiming he wanted to catch up. But there was something in the way he looked at me, in the glint behind his polite smile, that unsettled me. I had known Ryan since childhood. Our families were close, our summers spent together at grandparents' houses. But he had always carried an edge, a competitiveness that could sour any innocent game. I shook my head, refusing to dwell on it. It was probably nothing. I was about to push open the cafe door when my phone buzzed. A new email. I frowned at the subject line. Important financial notice. Curiosity piqued. I opened it, only to find a statement about a credit card I didn't own, complete with account numbers and balance details. My heart skipped a beat. It had to be a mistake. I called Clara immediately. "It's probably spam," she said, her voice calm as always. "Ignore it for now. I'll have a look tonight." But deep down, I knew this wasn't ordinary. Over the next few days, the notices became more frequent. Letters, emails, even phone calls. Bank statements for accounts I had never opened, unpaid balances I had never accrued. Something was terribly wrong. I tried to explain it to my colleagues, to friends, but even casual conversations turned awkward. "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" they asked. And that doubt, their subtle judgment, began to eat at me. Then came Ryan, casually walking into my apartment one evening, claiming he wanted to talk. He leaned against the kitchen counter, a bottle of wine in hand, smiling like he always did. "Heard about your little financial troubles," he said, his tone light, almost teasing. "Don't worry, cousin. We all get into sticky situations sometimes." I forced a smile, keeping my suspicions buried. But I noticed the way his eyes lingered on my mail, the way he casually glanced at my laptop as though he were studying me, measuring me. That night, Clara and I sat together, her hand warm in mine. "Ethan, I think someone close is doing this," she whispered. "Someone who knows you, maybe even family." My stomach dropped. I wanted to deny it, to push the thought away. But the evidence was mounting, subtle threads connecting in ways that couldn't be ignored. And yet, part of me refused to believe it could be Ryan. He was family, blood. Surely he wouldn't. The next morning, another letter arrived, thick and official, confirming yet another account opened in my name. This time, my hands shook as I held it. Clara, ever composed, scanned the documents quickly. "We need help," she said softly. "We can't fight this alone." That evening, I called Detective Harris, a private investigator specializing in identity theft and fraud. His voice on the line was calm, professional, yet carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "We'll find whoever's doing this, Mr. Ethan, but you need to prepare for some uncomfortable truths," he said. And just like that, the calm routine of my life began to fracture. I had no idea how deep the betrayal would go, or that the person I had trusted the most outside my immediate family was about to become my worst enemy. But before everything came crashing down, let me pause here. If you enjoy stories of betrayal, suspense, and clever revenge, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps us keep bringing you stories like this, and trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end. The following days blurred into a haze of confusion and mounting panic. Every time I checked my email or mailbox, there was another notice, another account I never opened, another debt I supposedly owed. I tried to stay calm, meticulously documenting everything, but the weight of it pressed on me like a stone in my chest. At work, whispers followed me down the hallways. Colleagues avoided eye contact, some offering sympathetic smiles that only reminded me of how precarious my reputation had become. One afternoon, my manager called me into his office. "Ethan," he began, "we've had some concerning reports about irregularities tied to your accounts. Is there something we should know?" My stomach sank. "No, there's a mistake. I stopped, realizing that no amount of explanation would erase the suspicion in his eyes. I left the office feeling hollow, the walls of my life closing in. That evening, Clara and I sat at the kitchen table, papers and envelopes spread across the surface like a battlefield. "Someone knows you very well," she said softly, her brow furrowed. "This isn't random. Someone with access to your personal information." I nodded slowly. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It had to be someone close, someone who knew my routines, my habits, even my family. My mind kept circling back to Ryan. He had come into town just as the first notices appeared, showing an uncanny interest in my work and my finances. Could it really be him? I tried to shake the thought. "He's family," I whispered, almost pleading with myself. He wouldn't. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the pattern. Then came the first real sign, an incident that confirmed my worst fears. I went to withdraw cash from my own account, only to find it frozen. Panic surged through me as I called the bank, fumbling over explanations. After what felt like hours, a clerk informed me that there had been unusual activity traced to a local IP address, one that coincidentally matched Ryan's apartment. I hung up, my hands trembling. "Clara, it's him," I said finally, the words tasting bitter. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took my hand and held it tight. "We'll prove it," she said. "We'll make him pay for this." That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of our childhood flooded my mind. The summers spent building tree houses, the late-night secrets we shared, the competitions that sometimes ended in tears or bruised knees. How could the boy I grew up with be the man dismantling my life? I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I called Detective Harris the next morning. "It's escalating," I told him. "Someone I know is behind this, and I have reason to believe it's my cousin." Harris's voice was measured. "We'll set a plan in motion, but be prepared, Ethan. When betrayal comes from within, it's harder to fight than anything else." Days later, Ryan appeared at my apartment unannounced. He smiled warmly, holding a bottle of wine as though we were old friends catching up. "Heard you've had some trouble," he said casually. "Tough luck, huh?" I forced a smile, keeping my suspicions hidden. But Clara caught my eye from the couch and shook her head slightly, her silent warning confirming my instincts. The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan's easy demeanor was a mask, and behind it, I could sense the predator waiting. That evening, after he left, Clara and I went through the latest bank statements. Every unusual withdrawal, every suspicious transfer pointed back to Ryan. My throat tightened. The betrayal was complete, and the realization that family could be so ruthless cut deeper than any stranger ever could. I vowed silently that I wouldn't let him win, not this time. Detective Harris wasted no time. He arrived at my apartment with a briefcase of files, his presence calm yet commanding. "Ethan, we need to track every single transaction," he said, spreading out papers across the dining table. "Whoever is behind this is meticulous. We'll need proof, and we'll need patience." I nodded, grateful but anxious. Clara sat beside me, her hand on mine, silently reminding me that I wasn't alone. Harris explained the strategy: bait accounts, careful monitoring, and a detailed digital trail. Every suspicious email, every odd withdrawal would be scrutinized. The aim was to catch the culprit red-handed. But even as the plan took shape, Ryan continued to appear in my life with unnerving timing. At a family dinner, he leaned casually against the kitchen counter, commenting on my financial troubles as if he were genuinely concerned. My parents nodded along, trusting his charming demeanor, while I seethed quietly. Each casual remark was a dagger, a reminder of how easily he manipulated perception. Then came an event that shook me to my core. I received a call from my bank at work, discreetly asking me to verify transactions I had never made. My pulse quickened as I looked at the monitor. The digital footprint clearly traced back to Ryan's devices. Harris had prepared me for this, but the reality was still staggering. The man I had shared summers with, who had once been my ally, was now my adversary. The next morning, I confronted him subtly during a brief encounter at my parents' house. "Ryan," I began, forcing casualness, "have you noticed any strange emails or calls lately?" He smiled, that crooked, infuriating smile. "Can't say I have," he said smoothly. "Why? Are you having issues?" The very innocence in his tone made my blood boil. I realized then that if I wanted justice, it couldn't be subtle. Harris suggested setting a bait account with funds that could be traced once accessed. I hesitated at first. The idea of luring Ryan into action made me uneasy. But Harris reminded me that proof was the only way to bring him down. We set the trap meticulously, ensuring every digital breadcrumb could be followed. As we watched, the hours crawled. Ryan's every move seemed calculated, his patience unnerving. I spent nights awake, checking notifications, each ping making my heart jump. Clara stayed with me, offering calm words, helping me focus on the end goal rather than the anxiety that gnawed at my nerves. Then, the breakthrough came. At 11:47 p.m., a notification blinked across our screens. The bait account had been accessed. My stomach lurched. Harris's voice was calm but firm. "He's in. Every move he makes is being recorded." I sank into the couch, my hands trembling. Ryan had fallen for the trap. The man I had grown up with, the cousin I had once trusted, had finally exposed himself. Yet, as relief washed over me, a strange sadness took its place. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I thought of our childhood, of shared secrets, laughter, and rivalry. And now, all of that history had been weaponized against me. But there was no time to dwell. Harris outlined the next steps: evidence collection, securing warrants, and coordinating with local law enforcement for Ryan's arrest. Clara squeezed my hand, whispering, "This is it. You'll get your life back." And for the first time in weeks, I dared to believe her. The morning after Ryan accessed the bait account, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Harris had warned me that the arrest would be tense, unpredictable. "He knows something's coming," Harris said as we reviewed the digital logs again. "He'll try to cover his tracks, manipulate people, maybe even deny everything. Be ready." Clara and I spent the day in tense preparation, making sure we had all statements, documentation, and bank statements organized. My parents called that evening, eager for a family dinner, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I agreed reluctantly, knowing that confronting Ryan at home before law enforcement intervened could be disastrous. At dinner, Ryan was charming as ever. He laughed easily, offered to help with serving dishes, and even complimented my cooking in a way that set my nerves on edge. I noticed the subtle glances he gave my laptop across the living room, the same laptop where Harris had been monitoring the bait account. My pulse quickened. Every word he spoke, every movement felt calculated. I could almost see the gears turning behind that smug smile. Clara squeezed my hand under the table. "Ignore him," she whispered. "Focus on the end game." But ignoring Ryan was impossible. Later that night, Harris called with instructions. The police would move in quietly, with a precise plan to prevent Ryan from deleting files or destroying evidence. He stressed the importance of patience. "We wait until we have him completely exposed," Harris said. "We can't afford a slip now." I spent the rest of the night pacing, unable to sleep, my mind racing through scenarios. What if Ryan panicked? What if he destroyed the evidence? The fear was overwhelming, yet beneath it all was a simmering determination. By dawn, officers were stationed discreetly outside Ryan's apartment. Harris and I watched from a parked car, the glow of the city still dim in the morning light. The tension was suffocating. Minutes felt like hours. Then the call came. Ryan had logged into the bait account again, transferring funds to a secondary account. "It's him," Harris murmured. "We have him." The police moved in swiftly. I held my breath as I saw officers enter Ryan's apartment, emerging moments later with him in handcuffs. His eyes flickered toward me, a mixture of defiance and disbelief, before he was guided into a squad car. Relief and grief collided in my chest.
The man I had grown up with, shared secrets and summers with, had betrayed me so completely that the bond of family was irrevocably broken. When Harris called later that day to confirm the evidence was secured, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The first battle was over, but the war of emotions, the courtroom, the testimonies, the confrontation of betrayal was yet to come. Clara and I spent the evening reflecting on everything that had happened. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "You didn't just protect yourself. You protected our future, our family, and even him, in a way. This exposure is his reckoning." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't easy to feel victorious when the wounds were so deep, but for the first time, I allowed myself a small measure of hope. The next chapter, courtroom drama, public exposure, and ultimate vindication, was about to begin, and I felt, for the first time in weeks, that I might actually survive it. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, faintly scented with old paper and tension. Reporters had lined the benches outside, cameras flashing as Ryan was escorted in. He wore a crisp suit that did little to hide the arrogance in his posture. Across the aisle, I sat with Clara, my stomach in knots. Every eye in the room seemed to weigh on me, some curious, some judgmental.
The trial began with Harris presenting the digital evidence, the IP addresses, transaction logs, and fraudulent transfers that traced directly back to Ryan. The jury leaned forward, captivated by the clarity and precision of the documentation. Ryan's lawyer, a sharply dressed man with an air of practiced confidence, attempted to cast doubt. He argued that someone could have stolen Ryan's credentials, that the evidence was circumstantial, and that Ethan's own accounts were sloppy enough to explain discrepancies. I felt my jaw tighten. Harris returned to the stand, calm and methodical, dismantling every claim with facts, timestamps, and screenshots. It was impossible to deny the truth. Then came my turn. Standing, I addressed the court, my voice trembling initially, but growing steadier with each word. "This wasn't just about money," I said, scanning the jury. "It was about trust, betrayal, family. The man seated here, Ryan Holtz, attempted to destroy my life, my reputation, and the bond of blood we once shared. I spoke of the childhood we had shared, of the summers and secrets, now weaponized against me. Ryan's eyes flicked toward me, a mixture of defiance and shame, but he didn't speak. When I finished, I returned to my seat, feeling a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. Clara's hand found mine, squeezing it reassuringly. Then came the testimony of Clara herself. She described the nights of fear, the subtle manipulations Ryan had attempted, and the emotional toll it had taken on both of us. Her voice shook at times, but each statement was precise, painting a vivid picture of the human cost of Ryan's betrayal. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of pens and the faint hum of a ceiling fan. After her testimony, Harris walked the jury through the digital breadcrumbs. Each transfer, each IP trace, each timestamp meticulously proving Ryan's involvement. The tension in the room was electric, as if everyone could feel the weight of betrayal suspended in the air. Ryan's lawyer tried one last time to deflect blame, suggesting Ryan had been coerced by external pressures, but Harris's evidence was too comprehensive. Finally, the prosecutor asked the question that cut through the charade. "Mr. Ryan, why betray someone you called family?" Ryan's lips twitched, as if he wanted to answer, but all that came out was a mutter, almost inaudible. The jury leaned in, and for the first time, the smugness in Ryan's eyes faltered. We adjourned for a short recess, the room buzzing with whispered speculations. Clara and I sat together, holding hands tightly. I felt the anticipation build, knowing that the verdict would soon change everything. The betrayal had been exposed, the evidence overwhelming. Yet a part of me dreaded the final confirmation, the public acknowledgement that someone I had loved and trusted had been capable of such calculated cruelty. The final act was imminent, and with it, the vindication I had long sought. The courtroom reconvened after the brief recess, and the atmosphere had shifted. Whispers had quieted, and all eyes were fixed on the judge as he called the session to order. Ryan sat rigid in his chair, fingers tapping nervously on the polished wood surface, though he still attempted to mask it with a faint, defiant smirk. The prosecution began presenting additional evidence, emails, chat logs, and surveillance footage that Harris had meticulously collected, demonstrating Ryan's careful planning and repeated attempts to manipulate my finances. Each revelation drew sharper gasps and murmurs from the gallery, the weight of betrayal pressing down on every listener. I kept my gaze fixed ahead, refusing to let my emotions spill over, though my chest felt tight with a mixture of anger and anticipation. Then came a shocking twist. One of Ryan's supposed allies, a former business associate who had been mentioned in a few ambiguous documents, took the stand. Under cross-examination, the man revealed that Ryan had been secretly funneling additional funds into offshore accounts and had attempted to coerce others into silence. The courtroom murmured. Even Ryan's lawyer looked taken aback. This was more than I had expected. The web of deceit was far deeper than anyone had realized. Harris leaned over to me, whispering, "This is the nail in the coffin. Keep your focus. We're almost there." When it was my turn again, I spoke with renewed conviction, recounting the emotional manipulation Ryan had inflicted, his subtle ways of turning family against me, planting doubt, and attempting to isolate me. Clara's hand found mine under the table once more, a quiet anchor of support. The judge paused, flipping through the exhibits, his expression unreadable. Then the defense called Ryan to the stand, giving him the opportunity to testify. I felt my pulse quicken as he approached, the arrogance in his stride returning for a brief moment. His initial statements were rehearsed, calm, even remorseful in tone, though his eyes betrayed calculation. He claimed he had acted under pressure, that circumstances had driven him to make poor decisions. But Harris, ever precise, dismantled each excuse with timestamps, digital logs, and emails, showing the deliberate and repeated nature of Ryan's betrayal. The tension was palpable. Every member of the jury leaned forward, absorbing each piece of evidence, each contradiction. Then, a moment of high drama. Ryan attempted a final act of deceit, claiming a falsified document showed I had consented to some of the transactions. Harris immediately countered with certified records, proving my ignorance and innocence. Ryan's smirk faltered, replaced with a flicker of panic. The courtroom held its breath. I felt a mix of triumph and exhaustion, knowing the endgame was near. The jury would deliberate soon, and the betrayal would be fully exposed for all to see. The months of anxiety, sleepless nights, and emotional turmoil were about to culminate in a single, defining moment. I glanced at Clara, who nodded, silently telling me that whatever happened next, we had done everything possible to reveal the truth. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed, but inside, all that mattered was the culmination of months of patience, strategy, and perseverance. Ryan had played his final hand, and the truth could no longer be hidden. The jury filed back in after hours of deliberation, their expressions unreadable, and the courtroom fell silent. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, each second stretching longer than the last. Ryan sat motionless, hands folded, jaw tight, while I gripped Clara's hand, feeling the tension ripple between us. The judge called the court to order and requested the foreperson to deliver the verdict. Every eye in the room turned to the jury box. The foreperson cleared their throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Ryan Holtz, guilty on all counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud a family member." Relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. My legs, stiff from hours of tension, felt weak. Clara leaned in, pressing her forehead against mine, whispering, "It's over." But even in that victory, there was a complex swirl of emotions: triumph, sadness, and the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. Ryan's face paled. His arrogance crumbled as the full weight of his actions registered. For the first time, the smug confidence he had carried for months was gone. The judge sentenced him to a term in prison along with restitution to cover the financial losses. Ryan's lawyer attempted to interject, to argue for leniency, but the judge dismissed it firmly, citing the calculated, premeditated nature of the crimes.
As Ryan was led away, I felt a mixture of vindication and grief. He had been family, a cousin I had trusted with my childhood secrets, my summers, my life, and he had chosen betrayal. Clara held my hand tighter, sensing the storm of emotions within me. "Justice has been served," she said softly, "but healing takes time." In the days following the verdict, we returned to our routines, though nothing felt entirely normal. I spent hours reviewing the aftermath, making sure every detail was corrected, every loose end tied up. Banks were notified, accounts secured, and my financial life slowly stabilized. Yet, emotionally, the scars remained. I found myself replaying moments from our childhood, wondering how someone I loved could transform into a manipulator so skilled, so calculating. Harris checked in occasionally, his calm presence a reminder that vigilance was necessary even after victory. "You've done everything right," he said during one call, "but never forget, people like Ryan can leave lasting echoes. Keep your defenses strong." One evening, I went back to the bank account records, reading through every transaction, every log. Each entry was a stark reminder of how precise and patient Ryan had been in executing his plan. And yet, seeing the trail laid bare brought a strange sense of closure. Clara joined me, leaning on my shoulder, as we watched the city lights flicker through the window. "It's finally done," she murmured. "You've won, Ethan." I nodded, allowing myself a long, deep breath. The battle was over, but the lessons endured. Trust cautiously, be vigilant, and recognize that betrayal often comes from those we hold closest. And if you've been following this journey, feeling the tension, the suspense, and the emotional highs and lows, I want to remind you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Sharing it helps others experience stories of resilience, justice, and cunning, and supports us in bringing even more gripping narratives. In the days following Ryan's sentencing, life settled into a cautious normalcy. Yet, every now and then, I caught myself staring at emails or messages, expecting another subtle betrayal, a hidden trap. It was an instinct that refused to fade. Clara and I spent evenings discussing the future, plans for our home, vacations, and even the idea of expanding our careers. But the shadow of Ryan lingered, a reminder that trust, once broken, was fragile. Harris suggested we secure all personal data and finances permanently, a precaution against any lingering schemes Ryan might attempt from prison. We followed his advice meticulously, locking down every account and monitoring online activity for any sign of manipulation. Yet, despite the safety measures, a part of me couldn't relax. One afternoon, a letter arrived, postmarked from the prison where Ryan was held. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short note, polite yet venomous, hinting that this was not the end, that his influence and cunning extended further than anyone had realized. I crumpled it, tossing it aside, feeling a chill run down my spine. Clara noticed my reaction. "Ignore it," she said firmly. "He's powerless now." But I knew better. Ryan's mind was as sharp as ever, capable of sowing discord even behind bars. Weeks later, a surprise came in the form of my old mentor, a retired banker who had guided me in my early career. He arrived with documents showing that Ryan had attempted to influence several colleagues and family friends to question my credibility even before the trial began. The full scale of his manipulation was staggering. He had constructed an elaborate network, carefully crafting appearances of innocence while orchestrating chaos behind the scenes. Every element of his plan demonstrated foresight and patience that bordered on obsession. I realized that the months of fear and uncertainty had been only a fraction of the storm he could have unleashed. Yet, despite the magnitude of his deception, the trap we had set and the courtroom exposure had thwarted him. Harris reminded me that strategy and patience had won the day, but vigilance was a lifelong necessity. That evening, Clara and I sat in silence on our balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. I reflected on the lessons learned. Betrayal could come from anyone, even family. Patience and careful strategy could overcome even the most cunning adversary.
and resilience was built through endurance and perseverance. The experience had changed me profoundly. No longer could I take trust for granted, but I had gained a deep understanding of human nature, cunning, and the lengths some would go to for envy and greed. Clara broke the silence, resting her head on my shoulder. "We survived," she whispered, "and we'll be stronger because of it." I nodded, feeling a quiet resolve settle within me. The danger Ryan posed had ended, but the awareness he had instilled, the knowledge of how fragile trust could be, would guide me forever. And as I looked toward the horizon, I realized that this story, though filled with betrayal and cunning, was ultimately one of resilience. If you've been following Ethan's journey, feeling the tension, the suspense, and the emotional stakes, take a moment to like and subscribe. Share it with someone who understands the pain of betrayal and the triumph of perseverance. These stories remind us to be vigilant, to value loyalty, and to never let treachery define who we are. As weeks turned into months, life slowly began to regain its rhythm. The weight of Ryan's betrayal lingered, but the constant fear and uncertainty had subsided. Clara and I returned to routines that felt ordinary but were now infused with a quiet appreciation for stability. Evenings were spent cooking together, laughing over minor mistakes, and planning small adventures that reminded us of life's simple joys. My parents visited often, offering apologies for doubting me, their guilt palpable but genuine. They wanted to rebuild the trust that Ryan had attempted to erode. One afternoon, Harris stopped by with a comprehensive report on Ryan's activities prior to his arrest. It was staggering, the network of deception, manipulation, and calculated steps he had executed. He had thought of everything, every move preemptively, and yet every single plan had been foiled by patience, careful monitoring, and the bait account. I felt a shiver run through me as I read through the documents. The man I had grown up with had been capable of meticulous, relentless betrayal. And yet, despite the depth of his planning, justice had prevailed. Clara held my hand as I set the report down. "You see what patience and truth can accomplish," she said softly. "Even the most cunning plans can be dismantled with careful strategy." Life, however, wasn't just about reflection. It was about moving forward. I began documenting my experience, detailing the strategies Ryan used, the subtle manipulations, and the emotional toll it took. I wanted to create a record, not just for myself, but as a guide for anyone who might face similar betrayal. In the quiet of the evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the skyline. There was a bittersweet relief in knowing that Ryan's actions had been fully exposed, yet a lingering caution remained. Betrayal, I realized, wasn't always loud or obvious. It could be subtle, patient, and devastating. The next morning, a letter arrived from a close friend who had followed the trial from another city. He expressed admiration for how I had handled the situation, the resilience I had shown, and the intelligence behind the trap that caught Ryan. His words brought a warm sense of validation, a reminder that even in moments of darkness, support and recognition could shine through. Clara and I discussed plans for a small getaway, a trip to the mountains, a chance to reconnect with nature and each other, free from the shadow of Ryan's deception. It felt like a milestone, a step toward reclaiming a life that had been disrupted but not destroyed. As I packed for the trip, I reflected on the journey, the fear, the tension, the courtroom drama, and ultimately the triumph of truth and strategy over deceit. And as always, I remembered the lesson that had become crystal clear. Vigilance, patience, and careful planning could overcome even the most cunning adversary. Finally, I turned to Clara, smiling despite the lingering memories. "We survived this," I said quietly, "and will thrive after it." She nodded, her eyes shining with both relief and pride. For anyone watching this story, feeling the suspense and emotional highs and lows, remember to like, subscribe, and share. This journey isn't just a tale of betrayal, it's a story of resilience, strategy, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The mountains welcomed us with crisp air and golden light as Clara and I arrived at our small cabin. The quiet serenity felt almost unreal after the months of tension, betrayal, and legal battles. I breathed deeply, letting the scent of pine and earth fill my lungs, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a real sense of freedom. Clara unpacked the car while I stepped onto the porch, gazing out at the rolling hills bathed in sunlight. The city, with its chaos, whispers, and lingering threats, felt like a distant memory. Yet even here, the lessons lingered. Betrayal leaves scars that time cannot entirely erase, but it also strengthens resolve, sharpens perception, and deepens appreciation for the people who stand by your side. That evening, we sat by a small fire, sipping hot tea and recounting the journey that had brought us here. I told Clara about moments she hadn't seen, the sleepless nights, the creeping doubt, the subtle manipulations Ryan had attempted at every turn. She listened quietly, her hand resting over mine, her presence a constant reassurance. "We're stronger now," she said simply. I nodded, understanding that strength didn't come from vengeance alone, but from enduring, learning, and ultimately choosing to move forward. Later, as the stars appeared overhead, I reflected on the choices that had led to Ryan's exposure. Patience, vigilance, and strategic action had turned the tables on a man who had thought he could dismantle my life with deception and cunning. I realized that even the closest bonds could be tested in unimaginable ways. But truth has a way of prevailing when combined with careful planning and unwavering resolve. In the days that followed, we explored the mountains, hiked trails, and allowed ourselves to laugh freely, an unburdening of the tension that had gripped our lives for so long. Clara and I made plans for the future, investments, career moves, and even long-term travel. Each step was a reclaiming of life, a deliberate choice to prioritize trust, loyalty, and resilience over fear. And as we sat by the lake one afternoon, watching the sun shimmer on the water, I felt a quiet sense of triumph, not in anger or revenge, but in the restoration of stability and justice. For those of you who have followed this journey, you've seen the danger of betrayal, the cunning of a manipulative mind, and the importance of strategy and patience. If this story resonated with you, I encourage you to like and subscribe. Share it with someone who values resilience, vigilance, and the triumph of truth over deception. Remember, even when betrayal strikes close to home, careful planning, unwavering resolve, and support from those who truly care can turn the tide. As the sun set behind the mountains, Clara rested her head on my shoulder, and I realized that life, though unpredictable and often harsh, had granted me victory in the form of restored trust, reclaimed peace, and the knowledge that no deception, no matter how cunning, could destroy the bonds that mattered most. This story of betrayal, strategy, and ultimate justice stands as a testament to resilience, the power of truth, and the enduring strength found in loyalty and love. And so, as the stars began to glitter in the sky above, I whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else, that even after the darkest trials, life could be rebuilt, and stronger than ever. This story may be over, but the betrayals never stop. Like this video, share it with your circle, and subscribe to Chronicles of Family Betrayal so you don't miss what's coming next. Another shocking story is just one click away below.